Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So as many people know, this past weekend, Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia. He gave an address to the Muslim world. And while he was in Saudi Arabia, he bowed before the king and received a golden medal. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But you have Donald Trump, a man who campaigned on anti-Muslim sentiment, a man who pandered to hatred and fear. This same man who presented himself as being tough on the Muslims, here he is in Saudi Arabia bowing before the Saudi king after criticizing President Obama for doing the same thing. See, the fact of the matter is, despite all this anti-Muslim rhetoric that this man espoused, he had to deal with reality. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you can't wage any kind of war against terrorism without working in cooperation with the Muslim world. And he's coming to realize this, or he already knew this, but he said what he had to say in order to convince these ignorant bigots to support him. So here he is. Despite condemning Obama for bowing before the Saudi king, here you have Donald Trump, a man who's supposed to be self-made, a man who's supposed to be independent and bold and outside of the box and, contrary to the establishment. Basically, you had this man doing the same thing that other presidents have done, and that's bow before the Saudis. Whether it was George Bush, whether it was Obama, whether it was Bill Clinton, the United States has a symbiotic type of relationship with Saudi Arabia. They are dependent upon Saudi oil and Saudi money. That's what the bottom line is. I mean, while Bush was waging his war against terror, he was holding hands with the Saudi king. While Donald Trump talks all tough against terrorism, he was literally dancing with the Saudis and receiving awards from the Saudis. And the reason why this is significant is because Saudi Arabia is the place where most of the 9/11 hijackers came from. Saudi Arabia is the place that a lot of these foreign terrorists come from. A lot of the foreign terrorists that supported Al-Qaeda were from Saudi Arabia. The foreign terrorists that support groups like ISIS are from Saudi Arabia. And in fact, a lot of those terrorists receive funding from people in Saudi Arabia. And even deeper than that, a lot of these terrorist groups, they are inspired by the Saudi interpretation of Islam, ultra-conservative, ultra-strict, intolerant interpretation of Islam. That's who inspires these people. And that's no coincidence. So you have a situation where Saudi Arabia finances, some of the people in Saudi Arabia finance these terrorists. Some of the actual terrorists come from Saudi Arabia, and they are inspired by the Saudi interpretation of Islam, ultra-strict, ultra-conservative, intolerant interpretation of Islam. But yet you have Donald Trump actually pretending like he's serious about this war on terror. But here he is literally dancing with the Saudis. And I posted a status on my Facebook page, on my personal Facebook page, and I was like wondering, why did the Saudis give this buffoon, Donald Trump, a medal? Donald Trump is a man who talked about banning Muslims from traveling to the United States. But in his ban, he conveniently left out Saudi Arabia. If you're going to have any kind of travel ban based on some kind of safety and security for the American people, why not include the country that brought the terrorists here? Why not include the country that's ideology has inspired the terrorists? Why not include the country that actually funds these terrorists? I mean, the fact of the matter is, it was never about any kind of national security or anything like that. This man is pandering to these hate mongers in this country, while at the same time cozying up to the country that is responsible for terrorism in so many different ways, as I pointed out before. But I wondered, why did the Saudis give this man an award? Why did they give this buffoon an award? And it turns out that the Saudis have a deal with the United States where they're going to receive over $100 billion in military support, military equipment and all this and that will be used against the people in Yemen. I mean, anybody who's been tracking anything about the news in Yemen knows that there have been atrocities committed in Yemen at the hands of the Saudis. They know about the civilian casualties there, all with the aid of US dollars. So they gave him a medal because of that historic deal, that arms deal, a token of appreciation. And at the same time, they also, according to another report that I read, and I'll post links to these stories in the description box when I get a chance. It'll probably be this evening. But they also gave $100 million, or planned to give $100 million to Ivanka Trump's charity. She has some foundation that deals with women and all that kind of stuff. And this particular fund will go to promote women, entrepreneurs, and all that kind of stuff. So basically, you have a situation here that looks like a form of bribery. You know, it looks like a incestuous, despicable type of relationship that the United States has with Saudi Arabia. You know, the dependence on oil and some kind of cooperation in this war on terror, you know, mandates that these countries have to work together. You know, despite all this rhetoric of changing the way America deals with terrorism and all that kind of stuff, the fact of the matter is, even Donald Trump, a man who professed to be all independent, a man who people voted for because they thought he was independent, it turns out he's just like all these other politicians. He bowed before the Saudis just like all these other past presidents did. And he ran game on these hate mongers who voted for him. He ran game on them. He tricked them, he deceived them, he bamboozled them. They thought he was anti-Muslim, and here he is cozying up with the Saudis. And also, they thought he was anti-Semitic as well because he played a good game. You know, he had them thinking that he was down with their anti-Semitism and all this and that. But he couldn't possibly be down with that. You know, he put on a show for these voters by pandering to them, by saying the things that they wanted to hear, by even including one of their own in the administration. But the bottom line is this, I mean, his daughter is married to a Jewish man. And when things hit the fan, he chose his son-in-law over these anti-Semitic people, over these bigots and racists. He chose family over them. And even right now, according to news reports, that guy Steve Bannon has basically been marginalized and disrespected in public and pushed to the corners, man. So, I mean, this should be a wake-up call for Donald Trump's supporters. You know, it should make them realize that he's just another politician. you know, that he will say what they needed to hear in order to get their vote. And then after that, he just falls in line just like any other politician. So with that, you know, I'll just say, please rate, comment, and subscribe. And if you're feeling my videos, get the thumbs up popping. Peace.